still morning? Good morning again. Would you please, for this morning's scripture reading, well, one of the few times I will ask you just to take out your lesson sheets. Take out your lesson sheets. The translations that we're using for our scriptural text today are the Contemporary English Version and the King James Version. Very short scriptures. From the CEV, our first scripture, carefully guard your thoughts, because they are the source of true life. From the King James Version, Proverbs 23:7, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. And let us bless the reading of the scripture together by affirming, and so it is. Amen. had a full morning. Yes. And we're not finished yet. That's right. You know, there's a ministry in this church that accosts me, and it's called Time Tithers. They make sure I have my act together. That's all I can tell you. They are the most efficient ministry that I know of. Let's give the Time Tithers ministry a hand. The Time Tither of the month is a person who is a member of the Universal Truth Center for more than 10 years. She's involved in the Sunday School, the AIF committee, and the Voices of Truth. And from time to time, she consults on the development of printed materials for the Universal Foundation for Better Living. Very, very talented woman, a very committed woman to the Universal Truth Center, Miss Janelle Ajaman. Time Tither of the month of June. For those of you who don't know, our Time Tithers are the volunteer entity in this church. Time Tithers, the backbone, the foundation of the Universal Truth Center. Practical Christianity in Action. Our current lesson series. Practical Christianity in Action. I believe this series to be the most important series that we can ever teach in the UFBL. Amen. I hold that view because the 5 principles that are covered in this lesson series are the principles upon which every lesson sermon, every class, and every activity of this foundation is based. These principles are the foundation of our foundation. They're the foundation of our foundation. Practical Christianity in Action. And as I looked and I saw the 3 young people receive the scholarship, let me tell you something. That is practical Christianity in action. I maintain that there's no reason for any young person who graduates high school and wants to go to any school after high school, be it community college, trade school, whatever, to leave here and not be able to afford that education. You see, let me tell you something. We ask you, what is it, every last Sunday to put $10 in the scholarship fund? So you have no idea how far that can go. We have 700 people to come through this church on Sunday. What is 700 times 10? 7,000. Times 52. Times 12. What is 7 times 12? 84. And 84 what? 84. You have no idea of the potential. Now, of course, we don't have everybody give the $10 because they don't understand the potential of this. If we can't send our young people to school with how much money? 74 what? $84,000 a year. Something's wrong. when we begin to understand that this is practical Christianity in action. Let's do something with it. Financial aid is fine, but shouldn't have to depend on that. Should be able to depend on the church. Practical Christianity in action. That's the lesson series. And it is interesting if you look, and you heard the introductory sermon, that the principles are in sequence. The final principle says what? The law of demonstration. The principles are in sequence. They are in the order that lead to demonstration in our lives. Now, the first principle is probably the biggest frog to swallow. The omnipresence of God. Only one power. I preached the second principle last week in Nassau in the Bahamas on the divinity of humankind, right? And I had a person come to me and said, well, you know, Reverend Anna, we want to believe, and she was talking about her and her husband, we want to believe in a supreme being. And I said, that's fine. God is being itself. But there are those who can't swallow the first principle, the omnipresence of God. See, then you have to ask yourself, what is God to you? God is infinite intelligence. God is the force that governs the entire universe. Now, if you can make that a man, you're good. There's no spot where God is not. That's what you preach, the omnipresence of God. I had a friend say to me when they heard Reverend Charles's sermon, they said, well, Charles done moved my God again. Every time you think you got a handle on it, it moves. Because if you ever catch it, that means you're finished with what you're supposed to do on this earth plane.
All right now.
Now, it's important that each time we cover a principle, that you use the week to contemplate what is being taught. If you can't get past the omnipresence of God, how you going to get to the divinity of humankind?
That's right.
See, we talk about Einstein, who determined that there's one universal law that governs every object in the universe. That's where our divinity is. Huh? The divinity of humankind. What does divinity mean? I just wrote a paper. Lord have mercy, don't ask me what prompted me to write this paper. I'm in a class on studying human nature, and the name of the paper woke me up, and it said, the nature of humans is divine. And I'm going to write this paper. I thought, oh, this would be a snap. You know, I'm a metaphysician, but I couldn't just use our books. It was an interesting experience. But one of the things I found is that divinity means simply that you are of God. You are of God. You are an emanation of God. You are one with God. The nature of humans is divine. I was reading in Unity magazine last night, and I saw something that comes from the Sufi mystic, Hafiz. And let me just read it to you. It says, all the talents of God are within you. How could this be otherwise? When your soul derived from its genes. You are divine. When you contemplate and spend time on dealing with these first two principles, then you can go to the third one. The power of thought. That's our lesson for the morning. Thought is an idea or opinion produced by thinking, or sometimes occurring suddenly in the mind. Okay. So, the next question should be, or your question should be, what is thinking? Thinking is simply the movement of ideas in mind. The movement of ideas in mind. And I realize there's only one mind because Yannick Douyan taught a lesson this morning where she talked about this part of us where thinking occurs. It's the movement of ideas in mind. So, what does that mean? As followers of the Charles Fillmore theology, we believe that humankind has three parts: spirit, mind, and body. Spirit, mind, and body. Have you heard that? Yes. Mind is also called soul. Spirit, soul, and body. Thinking goes on in the mind. And there are three phases of the mind. Now, this concept is not something that can be comprehended like this, so you got to take a class. I'm going to go over it very, very superficially, but it is important to understand that thinking goes on in the mind, and the mind consists of three phases: the superconscious phase of mind, the conscious phase of mind, and the subconscious phase of mind. Now, you can see when you say super and sub, that means what? Above and... So it means that it is not... I hope everybody's conscious right now. Is everybody conscious? So we are all functioning in the conscious phase of mind. Is that not correct? So it's the super conscious phase of mind that we're really not familiar with right now, and the sub, which are beyond us at this point in time. The superconscious phase of mind is that phase of mind which connects with the divine of us, and that is our spiritual nature. Superconscious connects with the divine of us, receives its messages from the divine. The subconscious phase of mind is where we have our belief system. There are other things there, memories and so forth, but right now for this lesson, we're going to say that the subconscious phase of mind is where our belief system is. And it is based, as Jesus taught, on our beliefs, so it is done unto us. In other words, our belief system is where we shape our experiences. They say there's they're always giving these proverbs to Eastern sages, and it may be, but there is one that always struck me, and not everybody can get this, but it says, what you see is behind your eyes. What you see is filtered through your belief system. So your experience of an event is not going to be the same experience that I have.
All right now.
In the conscious phase of mind is where we do our thinking. The conscious phase of mind, not the superconscious, not the subconscious, but it is in the conscious phase of mind where we do our thinking, where we move ideas through mind. In this conscious phase of mind, we determine our dominant pattern of thinking. And that dominant pattern of thinking results in our belief system. You see, we can get an idea from our the spiritual phase of our minds that says abundance. We get it in the conscious phase of mind. We can roll that around in the conscious phase of mind, catch it, let it become a part of what we believe, put it in the subconscious phase of mind, and then we experience it. That's how it works, in a nutshell. But you got to see it first. Take a class, please. Last week, the Reverend Tumpkin taught that God doesn't form our physical bodies. You remember that? God doesn't form our physical bodies. That which God forms, that which we are divine, is spiritual. So, how do the bodies form? Well, we form the bodies based upon what we believe, based upon our thinking. This is how we form our bodies, through our primary pattern of thinking. The Reverend Tumpkin reminded us that Jesus taught this, and you have to remember that Jesus is our way shower and master teacher. We don't say, as we just found out in the Sufi mystic writing, that there are not other teachings, but we choose to follow Jesus. And she reminded us what Jesus said, it is done unto you as you believe. It is in the conscious phase of mind that we choose what we think. Where we choose what we think. And watch this. The title of the lesson is The Power of Thought. We choose what we think in the conscious phase of our minds. It is in the conscious phase of our minds where our power lies. This is our power. The conscious phase of mind, and I recall when I was doing my, what do you call it, a verbal, oral qualifying to become a JCI teacher, I couldn't think of this word to save me. Lady said, what goes on, what word can you use to describe the conscious phase of mind? I came up with everything. The conscious phase of mind is pivotal. It decides whether you're going to go left or whether you're going to go right. That's where your power is. The conscious phase of mind is pivotal. It is in the conscious phase of mind that we determine the quality of our lives. Can you say this with me? I have the power. I have the power. Can you say it again? I have the power. Let's say it one more time. I have the power. The power is your ability to do. You have that power. And it is in your conscious phase of mind where your thinking goes on. The thesis for this morning's lesson is on your lesson sheet. And it says, the most creative and important power we have is the creative power of our thoughts. Actually, we don't create anything. We do demonstrate. We do form. God is already, see, what y'all don't realize is God is finished. God already did what God is going to do. When you call on God, all you calling on is your awareness of the laws of God, which you can learn. However, what we do is we shape these laws, what God has created, and bring them into visible demonstration. We bring them into visible demonstration. God only knows itself, and it only creates a perfect pattern. That perfect pattern that God created is always going to be there. Always going to be there. I want you to write down something right now. 5 words, 6 words. The lesson today is about consciousness. The lesson today is about consciousness. I don't know how long I was in this teaching before I had the nerve to tell anybody that I didn't know what consciousness meant. I always knew how it was defined. Awareness, that's what they tell you, right? But it still didn't catch me. What does consciousness mean? And I'm not going to tell you that I can give it to you, because I truly believe truth is not in the ritual, truth is in the revelation. And consciousness is a term that we have to just begin to contemplate and allow it to be revealed to us. Thought is the connecting link between God and humans. That's the first point on your lesson sheet. Thought is the connecting, going in the first blank, link between God, the next blank, and humans. The dominant thought patterns that you choose in your conscious phase of mind are instructions given to the subconscious phase of mind, which carries them out by projecting them onto the screen of life. We characterize the subconscious phase of mind as the tape recorder of the mind. It doesn't choose to produce anything. You choose what you want it to produce. God is omnipotence. It is all power. And we appropriate that power through our thinking. And this principle must produce what we instruct it to produce. God is all power. And let me tell you, not only is God no respecter of persons, which means it produces whatever you believe, whether you in jail or not in jail, but it also doesn't discriminate between your instructions.
That's right.
Who was it? What's a man's name who gave the sermon and he said there's no difference between worry and prayer? You remember that? No difference between worry and prayer. Meaning what? Both are your dominant patterns of thinking, so you're giving your subconscious phase of mind instructions to produce whatever it is you're giving it a message. If you're worried about not paying your rent, some subconscious mind only knows not to give you no money. Greek philosophers always understood this connection. When Aristotle said, what we expect that we find. Demosthenes says, what we wish that we believe. And of course, what you believe is what you experience. Even Shakespeare is purported to have said, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. The conscious phase of mind is where judgment takes place. This is where we choose. How do we label an experience? We label it good or bad. Or do we accept it as just being an experience? This is our power. Talking about the power of thought. We have the power to name anything. You always know when MC Hammer says it's all good. It's all good. Going through bankruptcy, it's all good. Truth comes from everywhere. Our scripture for this morning gives us direction. It says we destroy arguments and every proud obstacle raised up against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ. Yes. The Christ is that divine pattern. That's under point 1. Is that divine pattern. In researching the scripture for the morning, I found out that Paul of Tarsus is the one who used the word thinking the most. Topic of our colloquium was Christianity, Jesus or Paul. Point 2, any thought can come to your mind. We can choose whether to think about it or turn our attention from it. Mind, choose, attention in the blanks. What we give our attention to, and this is universal law, what we give our attention to must grow. Must grow. What we wrap our minds around must grow, must demonstrate in our lives. What we think about, we bring about. Professor of psychology at Harvard University wrote a book called The Blank Slate, and in it, he posits that the evolution of Homo sapiens depended on the adjustments that our predecessor species made to their environment. These adjustments, he says, resulted in a specific machinery being developed, which every human is born with now. Every human is born with a specific machinery of the brain. What is developed in that machinery is determined by what parts of it are stimulated. Is that the same thing? What you give your attention to. If I am in a cold climate, my attention is given to survival in that climate. Is that correct? Most of my ancestors were born in Africa. Of course, they say Lucy is everybody's ancestor, but were born in Africa. So I have melanin in my skin. So what did the brain do? Now, the brain produces, it made my skin so that it could absorb the sun, which is what the melanin did. So whatever it is that you have to adjust to on this blank slate is what is developed. That's an interesting concept, and it is consistent with what we teach. Consistent with what we teach. What is stimulated, what we give our attention to must grow. Simply stated. Simply stated. The progress of the human race is a result of that process whereby intelligence passes by successive degrees of incarnation, which we also call evolution, into the human mind. Let me read that again. This is Ernest Holmes. The progress of the human race is a result of that process whereby intelligence passes through evolution into the human mind. What is it that is stimulating? Our minds are developed by what we focus on.
That's right.
Scripture under point 2 says, do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample you underfoot and turn and maul you. Don't give your holy, precious thought time to something that is not worthy of your thought time. Don't give your holy, precious thought time to something you don't want to experience in your life. We're the only one of God's creation that can think about its thoughts. And I'll tell you the truth. Except for the last 6 months, I have been out of the city. I've been commuting to various places for about 3, almost 4 years now. Went to Brooklyn and then now in Nassau. And why am I telling you that? Well, I had a lot of time to stay in the airport and to wait in the airport. I was shocked at my own self-thoughts. You know, when you have that kind of idle time and you're just sitting there, Lord have mercy. I was giving my pearls to all kind of swine. And then wondering why it came back to bite me. When I finally realized, you know, somebody walks by and you look at the color of their shoes. Or you want to know, I wonder why she's with him. Or I wonder what they're going to eat today. Then we wonder why we have these varied, scattered experiences. Because we don't watch what we think. We let the tail wag the dog. See, controlling our thoughts is like shutting the barn door after the horses are gone. I'm from the state of Texas, so if you don't get that, it's all right. But you shut the barn door after you have allowed your thoughts to just go anywhere, or your attention to just go anywhere. We must be vigilant when we recognize that this is where our power is. I realized I was programming my mind to produce all kind of weird experiences. The more I looked at somebody's color of their shoes and their dress, the more I created or brought to me unusual combinations. I couldn't look fast enough. They was going too fast. Disciplining the mind is not an easy thing because we haven't known that we have that power, or we haven't understood that that's where our power is. Last week, the Reverend Tompkins talked about an internal locus of control. We have the power. We can focus our thoughts on the ideas of God. What are they? Health, prosperity, and happiness. We can make the same covenant that Abraham made with God, with the Lord, and that is to follow its laws, and we reap the same promises. It's through our dominant pattern of thinking that we develop our attitudes, our mental positions, our mental states. And it is to the extent that we learn to control these mental states, or learn how to build mental states that we want, that we will, not we might, we will automatically control our environment. In the New Thought teaching, we use the term consciousness. You remember that? This lesson is about consciousness. Consciousness is our mental awareness, our mental atmosphere. It is our prayer. See, we get to the place where we recognize we don't need to pray for things. We need to pray for the consciousness that produces the thing. The consciousness to demonstrate what it is that we desire. What does that mean? The consciousness of our oneness with God. The awareness of our oneness with God. How much am I aware of my oneness with God? Well, trying to follow Jesus, Jesus said what? When you see me, you see the Father. When he said, I and the Father are one. See, the Father is not worried about why this man is with this woman. That's not of any concern. The Father, the God, don't know nothing about man or woman anyway. No respecter of persons. What is it that's going on in my mind? Point 3. Healing and transformation. For healing and transformation to occur, we must begin to think in a new way. May 15th, 2004, Miami Herald, was a huge article that said healing prayer. And what we found out is that there's a significant amount of interest in the mental state, spirituality, meditation, and healing. You've got all kinds of, now we've got a national health institute that is funding the study of the association between prayer and meditation and healing. Call it alternative medicine. The recognition that a transformation of our minds, the development of our consciousness, of our divinity, is increasingly being recognized, not only by health professionals, but by us. Paul taught it in Romans 12:2, which is a defining scripture of the New Thought Christian movement, where it said, do not be transformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable. When we transform the mental atmosphere of our minds, then we transform our belief system. When we focus on changing our belief system of separateness and accepting that our power is in our thought, we get into the flow with God. And when we get into the flow with God, we receive a revelation. That's when you know that you know that you know that you know. We transform our belief systems, which represents the subconscious phase of our mind. And that the subconscious represents the heart. Metaphysically, the heart represents our subconscious level of mind. And it represents the content of what we think. You have the power to choose what you think, what you develop as your primary thought pattern. You have the power to focus on the ideas of God and shape your life, world, and affairs. That's good news. Think about your thoughts. Use your tools of building consciousness, which we teach. Take Basic Truth 1 and 2. They are denials and affirmations. So that you can get rid of the stuff you don't want to demonstrate in your life and appropriate that which you do. It's a simple process. The third principle. The power of thought. You can choose to shape your life any way you want it to be, and so it is.